There is competition for currency. If your currency is only available in all banks from Monday to Friday, they close at 4 p.m. No one wants to use your money. If you can get your salary paid every day or every hour rather than being paid at the end of the month, that's something which allows you to spend money, but that's also something which allows you to essentially get more efficient economy, more efficient mortgage. If DeFi is only about sending money quick, that's good, but that's not good enough. On privacy and CBDCs, I think people need to be honest. You don't have privacy today.
If you're in crypto, chances are you found yourself thinking, why is DeFi so complicated? Well, if that resonates with you, then you're in the right place. In this video, we've got Charles, the CEO of dYdX Foundation, to explain what's going on with DeFi right now and how you can easily stake on dYdX and start earning USDC stablecoin today. If you're in crypto for the long run, you will find this very valuable.
How are you? Good morning.
Good morning to you. You look great. You're the CEO of dYdX. And I think a lot of people want to know what's your journey like. How did you become the CEO?
I started my kind of journey in crypto in 2011 when I discovered Bitcoin. Before discovering Bitcoin, I was deep into peer-to-peer file sharing. So I was very familiar with peer-to-peer computing overall. And then someone forwarded to me the Bitcoin white paper, which was mentioning peer-to-peer money. So I was thinking, oh, peer-to-peer something. I'm very excited. So I want more of peer-to-peer. I realized that actually I was understanding the technical aspect of it, but I had to learn much more about money. I was using money every day, of course, but I was not understanding money that much. And that's really what Bitcoin brings me to study further. I actually bought my first Bitcoin on Taobao because at the time... In 2011, there was only one exchange. It was Mongkok in Japan, and it was very, very complicated. So one day I asked my wife, she was on Taobao doing some shopping, and I told her, do they have Bitcoin on Taobao? And she asked me, how do you spell? Let me check. We find some people selling Bitcoin, so I bought Bitcoin. The time that's the only way I found to get my first Bitcoin. So I sold my Bitcoin the same year. That's a mistake I just had to accept. It was a little bit wild for me. It was a big surprise. I got busy with my company, my business, and my family. It was taking too much of my time, plus the asset was extremely volatile. So I say, listen, focus on what you have to do today and forget this thing. So I sold everything the same year. Fast forward, I worked for the Hong Kong government, was head of fintech for the Hong Kong government, helping kind of building the fintech financial technology ecosystem in Hong Kong. At the time, I built a team of 10 people with offices in Beijing, in Hong Kong, obviously, in London, in San Francisco, the most promising fintech companies from the world to Hong Kong to use Hong Kong as a stepping stone for expanding in Asia. In this context, I made a company called Consensus. Consensus is a company behind MetaMask. And fast forward, I eventually joined Consensus to create the Consensus Hong Kong office. And later, I was in charge of Asia for Consensus, working with the MetaMask team, working with Infura. I built a lot of CBDCs, central banks digital currencies. My team at the time was actively building 6 different projects for central banks, from Australia to Hong Kong to Abu Dhabi and Korea. We had a lot of fun talking about obviously blockchain and crypto, but deep diving into the infrastructure. And I joined dYdX about 1.5 years ago. I wanted to kind of evolve in my next job into something new. I spend a lot of time in the space already. I learn a lot and I want to learn more. The proposition of dYdX was very interesting for me. So I spend a lot of time on Bitcoin. I guess I understand Bitcoin. I was working for Consensus, one of the largest blockchain engineering companies in the world, with a focus on Ethereum. So I understand Ethereum as well. But when the opportunity of dYdX came up, it was very interesting for me to get my hands on the app chain narrative, the application chains. When a project is large enough to build its own chain, so that was one aspect of it. Exploring the stack of Cosmos, the Cosmos SDK, and how this kind of very strong candidate for being the leader in technology as well is evolving and learning by building. That's something which I think works very well for me. And working on DeFi, moving my kind of experience up the stack at the application level. And DeFi is a very well-established use case, right?
Wow, that's a crazy ride. You've done literally everything. Let's say before crypto, you were in fintech. There has to be something about DeFi that is very appealing to you. What is it? Why DeFi?
DeFi means access. Getting access to a mobile phone wallet, getting access to a credit card is normal, and it's not a luxury anymore. But the reality is the world is rich of 7 billion people, and many of them don't have access to that yet. So for me, DeFi is access. The same way the internet gave access globally to knowledge and allows us to learn, to communicate. In money, we still have like kind of silos. The Eurozone, the people in Europe with enough money, there is the Chinese space, there is some other parts. It's still very much siloed, right? DeFi means access. DeFi means efficiency. If you have the chance to travel a little bit or do some international business, you quickly realize that the financial system is highly inefficient. And I cannot believe why, when I send money across the world with my bank, it takes 2 2-3 days. They always have an explanations for me, but to be honest with you, this explanations is not good enough. We have the technology available today and it's still legacy system. And behind that, there is this concept in DeFi of composability. And that's where I'm very excited also about DeFi is. And we see that with many projects. If you're deep in crypto, it's every day. But I think the opportunity of DeFi is really bringing these innovations to the masses. To come back to composability, essentially in the world of smart contracts and permissionless blockchains, start to build some products on the top of someone else, without having to give away all your power or your profits or anything like this to them. It's really like some kind of money Lego, you know? This aspect, it's really opens the opportunities, opens the space for innovation as well. So access, efficiency, and innovation, this is what DeFi means for me. Of course, we are still in the early days of DeFi, still very speculative. It's still very looking at crypto assets only, but we see that changing. We see stable coins coming in, we see real world assets slowly coming in. We see the audience growing also. So I think the early adopters of DeFi are very early adopters. But then when the mass expands, it comes with different people using DeFi for different things. In terms of timeline, I think we need to be realistic, not going through too much wishful thinking. DeFi is growing fast, but there is no reasons for it to be mass market before 5 to 10 years.
So that's your timeline, 5 to 10 years.
5 to 10 years. If you look at the speed of adoptions of the internet, it took almost 10 years, right? Some part of the world went very, very fast. Some others took more time. So I think we will see part of the world and probably Asia going on DeFi much faster than other places. The financial system is kind of okay today, or is good enough for some people. They don't have the excitement that we have to use this kind of innovation. So if I speak to my wife, she's fantastic, but she's happy with her debit card and mobile wallet. Yeah. And you need to bring something really unique. You can convince people using the current system to move to DeFi. I mean, there is plenty of people and very talented people working on DeFi innovation. Where we should be looking for ideas in blockchain, and ideas which resonate with users is simply by looking at fintech. The fintech industry has been active on refreshing the money systems for many years and very successfully, specifically in Asia. I think fintech means something in Asia. Fintech in Europe or in the US is very deceptive. I might have a bias. I spend much time in Asia, but I think in Asia, there is like clearly very strong fintech and very strong propositions. I think for us in crypto, we should be looking at what has been working well in fintech and trying to pick those winners and kind of improve them further with crypto. So that's probably the fastest path to find product market fit and accelerate the growth of the user base of crypto and DeFi.
Some people say this DeFi thing eventually take over the traditional finance because it's not efficient enough. What's your take on this?
I think it will. We will not realize it. If DeFi was to have a strategy, we should do it very quietly and very humbly to make sure that the people get to use DeFi, but in a very smooth way. The reality, most people don't want to have one more wallet. Most people don't want to deal with private keys. DeFi is still a complex process today. What I hope is to see DeFi happening very quietly, but everywhere, essentially. And how it can come, if you look at the agenda of central banks today, I can safely say 100% of the central banks in the world, if not 99%, are working on CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. What they're doing is essentially they're putting the central bank money on blockchain in order to move it faster and to be cross-border and to make sure their currency remain competitive. There is competitions for currency. If your currency is only available in all banks from Monday to Friday, they close at 4 p.m. No one wants to use your money because your money is not practical. It's strategic and urgent for central banks to essentially make sure people want to use their money. Otherwise, the currency will lose traction, right? So my point being, central banks are building on blockchain for the most part. So I think we will start to see some projects using components of DeFi for CBDCs, and DeFi will come in the life of people in multiple ways. One illustration of that is a central bank project in Hong Kong, the innovation hub from the BIS and the HKMA and some others. Essentially, and PDOC China, actually. So I was working on this project some time ago. What is interesting is they essentially build a blockchain infrastructure under their own terms, but that's already a great path forward. And then they pick some smart contract concept of swapping, for example, CBDCs against one another. So DeFi is coming, definitely. It's going to take more time than people expect. I don't think people will all be using USDC. They will be using also their domestic central bank tokens. Will they mix together? I don't know. But I think this kind of innovation, which will happen on the background, will definitely come. And people might come into DeFi via video games. In Asia, there is a big industry of video games. So people might first get like some NFTs or some digital assets for video games and soon realize, oh, I can put money on it also. And I can put this money to work. I can do some lending. I can do different activities. And this kind of path to customer acquisition is also interesting. If you can get your salary paid every day or every hour rather than being paid at the end of the month, that's something which allows you to spend money, but that's also something which allows you to essentially get more efficient economy, more efficient mortgage. Today, it's very kind of binary. You work 30 days, you get paid. But if you look at fintech, you can get essentially the promise of your salary at the end of the month, or maybe the promise of your salary every day, being sold to a bank or being sold to a smart contract system to optimize the kind of capital use and make it more efficient. So this kind of very new things will bring people in. If DeFi is only about sending money quick, that's good, but that's not good enough. People will not change app on their phone for that. Money is already fairly quick. But if you can make some value propositions which are very strong, you're going to be paid every day, not at the end of the month anymore. And maybe you can put use your salary smart contract to get a better mortgage, for example, or to get the money in advance. That's something which have very strong capital use features, which brings something very new.
That is very interesting, because I was going to ask you, how do you actually attract more people into DeFi? And I think you just answered the question, is maybe not label it as DeFi so people think it's so hard. It's more like, how can they actually use it in their daily lives and make it better?
We need to be patient. DeFi is part of Web3. And if you look at the way the internet grew over the years, it took a long time. And the internet at the beginning, I'm 46 years old, so I used the internet in the very, very early days with phone lines and very slow speed and all these things. DeFi or the internet take time for the technology to improve, for the user experience to improve as well. I think what many people should be doing is simplifying the UX by an order of magnitude and trying to really make clear with themselves, is my product for the degens or is my product hoping to go mainstream? I think that's what, for example, Uniswap is doing very well. If you go on Uniswap, it's very simple. You have some tokens, we want to sell it, here is the price, click here. If you go on some other exchanges, they give you all kind of order types, all kind of leverage. The screen is full of buttons. It's for a very specific type of users, right? And dYdX is a very good example. But you need to be clear, honest, and opinionated about who are you targeting and what do they want exactly. After you get this kind of clarity in your mind about your target audience, it's way easier to make things really dedicated to that.
Can I ask you a question on CBDC? So I've heard a lot of different mixed opinions on CBDC. Some people think, it's governments growing more control on the people. And what's your take on this whole CBDC situation?
It's very much a polarizing topic indeed. My take is CBDCs are necessary for our economies. CBDCs are necessary for many countries and currencies. If you're paid today in a currency which is not modern enough, your currency will depreciate. This is just the forces of the market. On privacy and CBDCs, I think people need to be honest. You don't have privacy today. If you're using a mobile phone wallet, if you're using a credit card, at any point in time, if you are misbehaving, any police department in any countries can give a call to the bank or the credit card issuer and saying, oh, please, can we get the details of Charles' latest transactions because it's kind of suspicious. So there is no privacy today already. So don't worry more. I think you have to be honest about that. And it's just going to make also things more efficient by having a better money experience and bringing maybe bits and pieces of DeFi innovation. So I'm excited about CBDCs. I hope the CBDCs will be sitting on permissionless blockchain. CBDCs will first live on private blockchains. So private blockchains will essentially enable banks, and banks will get some kind of private blockchain between the banks. The central banks have to protect also the banks, right? Banks are important, banks are doing a job. So I think the next step of CBDCs is faster adoptions and usage at the wholesale level between banks. And later, I hope CBDCs will come into permissionless chain, meaning I can really move my money everywhere without having the latency, the unknown benefit of using a bank in the middle, unless a bank really brings some serious advantages. It's a hard mission for central banks. So they need to organize the technologies, they need to convince the commercial banks and within their country to be part of the project, have them excited, and making sure that the commercial banks are implementing it. Many people don't realize, but many projects at central banks are not successful. And CBDCs is strategic for the central banks. So they really want this CBDCs project to be successful. But when you speak to a bank which is making money through inefficiencies, when you speak to a bank which is sometimes 300,000 employees, which is a very old and slow-moving organization, it's not an easy job. I'm excited about CBDCs. I think privacy is something of concern, but people should not be naive about it. And privacy, as in many countries, there is already privacy laws, and CBDCs will need to follow these existing laws of privacy. And then it's going to bring just more efficient and more fair ecosystem by building a better infrastructure in a fintech ecosystem. So when central banks build CBDCs and they build an open system, they give fair chances between banks and fintech startups.
Okay.
If you have the right infrastructure, the financial infrastructure on which everyone can come and plug in. It's not happening in many countries. One very good example of this fair and highly competitive financial ecosystem is India. India has been implementing UPI, which is essentially a payment API at very, very large scale. So a bank and a startup can compete with the same tools.
Wow.
And CBDCs can be in this kind of era where central banks buy technology, bring fairness to the market. Why many financial systems are not innovative anymore? Because they belong to 25, 50 banks, and these banks are slow and they don't have any advantages in bringing innovation. But one way for central banks to kind of check their ecosystem is bringing technology for fair access. And then a small company can provide similar service to a big company, and then you bring competition again. And competition is good for users, for pricing, for everyone.
I love that. And I feel like all these different industries and different experiences you have has given your current company, dYdX, a fresh breeze. What does dYdX do?
dYdX is a DeFi project started in 2018 by Antonio Giuliano, which is a former Coinbase engineer. And dYdX is today the world's largest decentralized exchange protocol for crypto derivatives. So let me unpack that because there is a lot of complex words here. So in the world of crypto trading, there is two different types of venues where people can buy and sell or express their opinion on the market. You can go to a centralized exchange like Binance, Coinbase, and many others, or you can go to a decentralized exchange like Uniswap, dYdX, and many others as well. Centralized exchanges belong to one company as they are sitting in one database only, and they organize the trading. They can very similar to a traditional bank, to be honest. And then decentralized exchanges are essentially very lean organization. Smart contracts are managing all the different flow within those exchanges. So dYdX is a decentralized exchange. It sits on a blockchain. That's one thing. The second thing is in crypto and in general market overall, people have the opportunity when they can and when they decide to, you can either trade spot, so you can buy the real asset, you can trade spot Ethereum, you can trade spot Bitcoin and receive a Bitcoin or receive an ETH and put it into your wallet. That's spot trading. And then there is another part of finance, which what we call derivative. And derivative allows you to express your opinion in very different way. Rather than just buying as the asset, you can express your opinion and essentially taking some kind of bet, saying, okay, I believe that Bitcoin will keep growing in value over the next hours, days, months, and then take a bet on this with some leverage and being bullish or bearish on one asset. And the reality is that the derivative on futures market are 10 times bigger than spot market. So every time there is a Bitcoin which is exchanged on centralized exchanges as a spot, there is 10 times more Bitcoin being exchanged in the derivative market. So dYdX is a decentralized exchange focusing on derivative, and we are the number one globally. We are bigger than Uniswap. It's a project which is led by the community, by some companies. It's a decentralized open source DeFi protocol focusing on crypto derivatives.
Like you said, you guys are the biggest and you have the biggest market share on DeFi derivatives. What do you think you did right and what led to this kind of success?
That's a great question. dYdX started its history on Ethereum and then was one of the very early adopters of layer 2s. Layer 2s are all over the place today, but dYdX kind of migrated to layer 2 very early on. So I think what dYdX did well was always to assess the technology available in our space and being blockchain agnostic. If the community decides to change the underlying blockchain technology, that's perfectly fine. So Ethereum went from Ethereum to layer 2, and now the dYdX has his own blockchain, the dYdX chain. So I think what dYdX did well over time was to be kind of technology agnostic and product first. Very simple, but very efficient. The second thing dYdX has been doing well is extreme focus. dYdX only works on derivatives. This is where the attention of everyone is crypto derivative, period. Nothing else. No spot, no options, no NFTs, no whatever is under the sun. We see many projects having sometimes a slow start and starting to diversify. dYdX had a good start, but I think the response was very good because the focus was extremely clear. So being agnostic in technology, being laser focused on one use case only, and trying to be the best in the world for this focus. And that's what dYdX has been delivering. And now that the dYdX ecosystem has moved to the dYdX chain, it really enables a lot of the technology and kind of shared innovation to be happening. So we see that through the dYdX governance, where people and the users of the protocol can decide on new listings. They can use different voting and governance mechanism to upgrade the protocol as a group in a very decentralized manner.
I was talking to this very important person from your team, Hisashi, and he said, you are aiming to list 500 tokens on dYdX by the end of this year.
This is the beauty of dYdX also. It's extremely decentralized now, and the decisions and the focus and the strategy is defined by the community. So essentially, the community can launch new market just by voting on them, and the software has been made in a way that anything that has a healthy price feed can potentially be listed. So we expect in the coming weeks a lot of different governance votes. We see conversations on the forum, dYdX.forum, of people asking and kind of preparing listings of new assets. So that's a very exciting part. More trading pairs. And also, I think one piece of technology which is coming for the dYdX ecosystem, and many different groups are working on this topic, is what we call the permissionless market. So permissionless market means that the users of dYdX can list new markets in a permissionless way. And that's a very strong proposition also. There is no lord, there is no master. The master is essentially the governance and the users. And when you give the right tools and when you define the good risk framework as well as liquidity framework, you can really have a very interesting new marketplace where the pace of new listings is faster. The pace of delisting is also efficient to make sure that you don't keep some markets which are not healthy anymore. More crypto native assets, that's for sure. But we can think of new type of assets such as indexes, for example, of crypto assets, carbon credits, or other commodities. Think of all the commodities which are traded today in the Chicago Stock Exchange. Think of cacao, sugar, corn, and so on. This is a marketplace which is kind of a closed door marketplace. You need to be qualified in a certain type of company to be able to trade over there. Bringing the access to the world to this kind of trading, if that's possible and compliant, I think that's a very strong and new proposition.
You guys launched a chain of your own last year in October, and for the first time, dYdX is fully decentralized. What does that mean for the general user? For example, if I'm a user of a DEX, what I care about is if it's easy to use, if it's liquid. What does this decentralized mean for me?
What it means, so maybe just to give some background, I'll be a bit technical here, but hopefully this is useful and understandable. The version 3 of dYdX, which was sitting on Ethereum, mainnet and Ethereum layer 2s don't have the throughput and the capacity to host on-chain an order book. The order book is where the buy orders and the sell orders match and the price gets discovered essentially. On the Ethereum version of dYdX, the order book was always hosted off-chain on an AWS server. On the new dYdX, sitting on dYdX chain is fully decentralized now. So the order book is not into a private server anymore. The order book is now essentially hosted by the validators in their memory. So what it means for you is you don't have any last question mark on the transparency of the marketplace. You don't have any questions on, is my order really matched the right way? Is someone trading against me? It was not happening before, but the point is now it's obvious and it's visible for everyone. If you go, for example, trading on Coinbase or Binance or Wabi or whatever centralized exchanges, you might have the question, what's happening exactly at the exchange? If I want to buy at $1, is someone buying before me? There is no way you will know. It's a black box. I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong, but I'm saying we don't know. We cannot see that. True. With the evolution of dYdX today as a DeFi user, it means that you can totally get an understanding of the marketplace. It brings some value for different type of users. So for the general users of dYdX, they know that the marketplace is actually very healthy and totally transparent now, from A to Z. You see everything. That's really exciting. Number two, kind of benefit is more for the hedge funds, institutionals, market makers, or what we call prosumers, users with a strong experience and very kind of complex and mature way of trading. They get to understand the marketplace. Many of them are using bots. Many of them are using AI or machine learning to understand the market and trade on the market at a high frequency and with very complex type of strategies. When you get to understand the marketplace, when you get to understand the order book, you can design much more efficient and creative ways of expressing your opinion on the market, i.e. trading. And it's not possible if you are building an algorithm trading in front of a black box. It's like you're trying to guess with with your eyes not seeing anything.
Covered, yeah.
So it's really very interesting. The users get a more fair marketplace and more visible marketplace. And the power users get also a new world where they can really deep dive into the market. So the proposition of dYdX is very strong. This is why we see the growth we are seeing today. More than 20 billion of trading volumes on the protocol since the launch of dYdX is this aspect of transparency and kind of new experience. For the normal user in terms of UI and UX, more or less the same, honestly, no big change. That's a very big talent of the dYdX engineers, is they are able to bring you very groundbreaking innovation without disturbing your kind of experience, just improving it.
Can you tell us what validators or stakers are? Because I know that your trading fee actually goes to them instead of going to the exchange.
The dYdX chain is run by 60 different validators. It's an application chain. Essentially, when these validators kind of make this running, they enable the dYdX exchange and the dYdX protocol itself. These validators receive dYdX tokens from stakers. So you and me and anyone can essentially decide to bring their dYdX token and stake them to validators. These validators have two missions: verifying the chain and minting new blocks. So that's a very classic kind of mission for validators. And the number two mission for validators is to essentially host the order book and update the order book so that the order book gets distributed and efficient. As a staker, you can stake with using your Ledger hardware wallet, for example, and directly stake in a pure DeFi way your tokens to a validator. And as you mentioned earlier, one of the big innovations of dYdX is that community decided via a governance vote to redistribute 100% of the fees collected by the exchange to validators and stakers. So today, when you stake your dYdX on the dYdX chain, you get rewarded in USDC, not in dYdX tokens, in USDC. And where are these USDC coming from? It comes from the users of the dYdX exchange. So when you trade on dYdX, you pay trading fees, and these trading fees are paid in USDC, and 100% of the fees paid by the users are going directly to the stakers via the validators.
所以我们在讲这个质押到底怎么操作呢 ？dYdX 现在质押分成7个步骤。先在交易所买 dYdX 代币，然后把代币转到以太坊区块链上。但记得 Charles 说 dYdX 自己做了一个区块链，对吧？所以我们要再把 dYdX 的这个代币呢，从以太坊区块链跨链到 dYdX 链上，接着就可以质押了。它的质押之所以受欢迎，是因为最后拿到的奖励会是 USDC 稳定币，而且呢是随时可以提领。 感觉起来很复杂吧？但是基本上呢，你听过一次就会了。我先到 OKX 交易所买了 dYdX 代币 ，Big 交易所之后也会有，去中心化交易所 Osmosis 也是可以买得到。把小狐狸 MetaMask 钱包复制到你以太坊的这个区块链钱包位置，注意左上角呢是 Ethereum Mainnet 以太坊的区块链。再回到 OKX 交易所提币 dYdX 的这个页面，把刚刚复制好的这个 MetaMask 以太坊钱包地址贴上去，确定提币。回到小狐狸 MetaMask 的钱包了，这时候 dYdX 呢可能还没有出现，确定一下左上啊还是以太坊 Ethereum Mainnet， 看到 Import Token 输入代币啊，这里就会看到刚刚转进来的 dYdX 成功出现在小狐狸 MetaMask 的钱包里面。接下来的步骤呢可能会需要一些以太币来当做手续费。如果你的小狐狸 MetaMask 的钱包里面没有以太币，那就跟刚刚转这个 dYdX 的步骤是一样的，先在 OKX 买这个以太币 ETH。转进来当手续费，大概买个10块钱美金以内就可以了。再来，我们要把小狐狸以太坊钱包里面的 dYdX 转到 dYdX 链上了。来到 bridge.dYdX.trade， 我会把这个连结贴在资讯栏，请务必确认它是正确的网址。连接小狐狸 MetaMask 钱包，这里就会显示了 ETH dYdX 的数量，也就是说在以太坊链上的 dYdX 代币数量。那我要把这些代币呢都转到 dYdX 区块链上，确认之后呢，你就会看到 Sending in Progress 传送中。那这个步骤呢，可能需要等个1-2天。
Few moments later，
dYdX 代币都转到 dYdX 区块链上之后呢，准备来质押哦。这时候呢，会用到 Kepler 钱包，我会把连结放在资讯栏。下载之后呢 ，Kepler 钱包就会出现在 Google Chrome 右上的扩充这里。我们要 import an existing wallet， 输入现有的钱包。你看它这里可以 connect hardware wallet， 连接冷钱包，所以呢，你是可以用 Ledger 冷钱包来质押，这样更安全。如果你金额可能比较大，或者是希望更保险，要买冷钱包的话呢，我一样会把冷钱包最大的品牌 Ledger 的购买连结放在资讯栏。要在币圈长期走跳的人呢，还是会需要一个冷钱包的。不过呢，现在我继续示范直接质押咯。我选择这个 use recovery phrase 或者是 private key， 用本来就有的私钥或者是恢复短语，选择24个字。回到前一步 bridge.dYdX.trade， 点选右上，然后按 export secret phrase， 输出恢复的短语。这里会提醒你哦，千万不要把这个 secret phrase 给任何人知道，不然呢可能会让自己暴露在风险里面。恢复短语就不要分享给别人，好吗？按 copy 复制之后呢，来到 Kepler 贴上之后，选择 import 输入，接着设定一个名称，点选荧幕 Google Chrome 右上的这个扩充 Kepler 钱包 ，Manage Portfolio in Kepler Dashboard， 到 Staking 质押这里呢，我就会看到 dYdX Staking 跟我的这个 dYdX 代币，按 Stake 质押，这里我就会看到很多不同的 Validator， 也就是验证者，我可以选择把代币质押在几个不同的 Validator 不同的验证者之下。注意啊，这个 Commission 是验证者会跟你收的佣金，所以选择不要收太高的这些验证者。好，我选了3个不同的 Validator， 把我的这个代币质押进去。画面右上立刻可以看到目前我的这个 USDC 奖励了，按 Claim 立刻就可以开始提领咯。
dYdX is one of the few projects which is a profitable project, and the project profits is going to the stakers. So if you stake dYdX on the dYdX chain, you can get essentially a stream of USDCs, which are the trading fees. I've never seen that before in crypto.
Yeah, it is very, very unique.
This is a big difference with some staking experience in some other chains. So if you stake, for example, on any chain, for the most part, you get paid with a token from the chain.
Yeah.
And usually this token is high inflation. So you need to quickly either restake or sell it. On dYdX, you get paid in USDC. There is no urgency to sell it, or you can use it in many, many more ways. And that's a very exciting experience. And this can be done just with your Ledger hardware wallet, for example, or you can use some exchanges. I think OKX announced publicly a few weeks ago that they are in the process of integrating dYdX as well. So I suppose OKX users will be able to stake also their dYdX from the OKX ecosystem and collect as well USDCs.
You mentioned dYdX token. I think a lot of people are talking about how they're concerned about the unlocking schedule of dYdX. Can you tell us a little more on this?
Absolutely. There is no change of numbers of dYdX since the dYdX kind of migrated away from Ethereum and created the new chain. So the new dYdX chain does not mean more dYdX. The Ethereum dYdX are migrating, so people can migrate away from Ethereum to the dYdX chain, but there is no change in inflation. There is regular unlocks from the protocol itself, which is essentially feeding the community treasury of dYdX. So the community treasury of dYdX community represents today about $750 million US, which are available for the community to deploy for grants, for DAOs, for supporting various strategic initiatives in the ecosystem. So it's also a very wealthy and long-term thinking type of ecosystem with the right resources. The unlock are programmatic, so you can see them coming. And there was an unlock in December from the original investors in dYdX, which I think went in a very as transparent as possible. And we've seen a lot of these early investors also migrating to the dYdX chain. We have today a large majority of tokens which have already migrated to the dYdX chain to support the growth of the chain.
So you don't see the unlock schedule impacting the price. How do you actually comfort people when they're worried about how it's going to impact if they hold dYdX long term?
That's a good question. There is unlock in many different ways on every blockchain. What is important is to be able to see it coming and understanding it. There is new Bitcoin being minted every 7 minutes on Bitcoin. This is some kind of soft and slow unlock. On Ethereum, you've got also an inflation as well as a dynamic of Ethereum burning. That's also some soft and slow unlock. Everything has for the most part unlocks. There is unlocks on dYdX, but they are transparent and visible. So I think people can just consider and study it, but I don't think there is anything very different from any other systems. You can start your journey within dYdX with the dYdX Foundation website, where you get access to the documentation and get a better understanding of the unlocks. It's very transparent, so people can build their own opinion from that fairly easily.
So just on a personal level, if there's a friend of yours that, is first or new in crypto, would you actually recommend them to use this staking or trading reward system?
I will not invite anyone to dYdX without any experience in crypto or trading. Remember, it's a protocol for crypto derivative. So the crypto derivative are more complex crypto products. dYdX is not for your sister or your cousin which just discovered Bitcoin 2 weeks ago. It's something which is much more complex. So it's better to educate the people rightly. Being a staker on dYdX, I think, is probably more simple and approachable. The trading experience and understanding derivative trading is something for more kind of experienced users. Yeah.
Staking isn't the only way to earn rewards, right? There's also this Chaos Labs incentive program.
So at dYdX, there is 2 types of rewards, kind of redirected to the users themselves. So whenever you trade, you get essentially an immediate rewards in dYdX tokens in size of your trade. There is also rewards which are made for the market makers or kind of power users, where this time there will be a point system. So essentially this kind of incentive program evaluating via Chaos Lab services the kind of activity and level of activities and contributions of different power users and market makers and rewards them accordingly.
After the approval of Bitcoin spot ETF, there are a lot of institutional investors interested in crypto now. So I think people are worried these big companies are essentially centralized. For example, BlackRock is huge. They can actually have a big impact on Bitcoin. What's your take on this?
That's a good question. I like decentralization. I'm a builder of decentralization, but I'm also cognizant that many people don't care. Most users don't care about decentralization. You want to have a healthy product and functional product. You want to have ease of access. For some people, buying Bitcoin directly and keeping it on their wallet is easy. For some others, there is no way they're going to be involved with that. It's normal to have some kind of core of early users with very strong ideas, but when the technology evolves and grows, the audience and the people involved with this technology comes from different horizons with different objectives. So having bigger and bigger player in space, we've seen that before. We see the centralized exchanges being extremely powerful in our space also. So if people are a little bit worried about BlackRock, for example, you should also consider and review your opinion about Coinbase or Binance or some of these giants. Think of FTX, which was a very big player. When they collapse, they impact the market also greatly. So it's not coming, and this phenomenon does not start with the Bitcoin ETF. And I think it's just a testament of the additional usage and bringing different paths for people to approach crypto. It's a normal kind of path of growth of the technology.
You just mentioned some of the bigger players in centralized exchange, and they have very complicated relationship with governments and regulators. What is the relationship between dYdX and how do they interact with different governments and regulators?
If you want to map the dYdX ecosystem, there is first and foremost the users and the community of dYdX. This represents tens of thousands of people, which are token holders, validators, stakers, builders, market makers. We highlight this ecosystem in the dYdX Foundation ecosystem report. And below this community, which is voting and deciding on how to deploy this open source software, there is different entities. We have the dYdX Grants DAO, which is giving grants to people building on dYdX. There is also the dYdX Operation DAO, which is running some core services for the dYdX chain. There is the dYdX Foundation, which I represent today. There is also dYdX Trading, which is a company founded by Antonio Giuliano. All these entities are totally independent, and they essentially work and kind of follows the guidance of the token holders expressed via the governance. The relationship with regulators is happening on multiple fronts in many different ways. I think regulators have more and more an appetite to understand the technology of DeFi. As we mentioned earlier in this conversation, central banks are starting to use CBDCs, are starting to use smart contracts for swapping CBDCs of different currencies. They really understand more and more things. And it's a mistake. Regulators are only coming in one kind of type, which is like punishing people around. Many of them are proactive and welcoming conversations. It's part of our responsibility as industry practitioners to engage with regulators and not only only claiming DeFi is better, but demonstrating. That's a very big difference. Demonstrating that actually what DeFi can provide is overlapping and supporting what the regulators want to achieve. Regulators want healthy marketplace. Regulators want transparency. Regulators want efficient markets. The technology of DeFi can provide that by design since the beginning. Very different than regulating an exchange, for example. It's more complex also because you cannot regulate one company. It's decentralized open source software. But I think it's our responsibility to engage and remain engaged with validators and demonstrate that the agenda of the regulators and the features of DeFi are matching. So there is multiple conversations in multiple ways. Eventually, I think what regulators are converging or what they should be considering more, not regulate the technology because it's not possible. You cannot regulate technology. You cannot regulate internet. You cannot regulate Bitcoin. You cannot very hardly regulate. You can regulate the operators. You can regulate the people giving access to this technology. So the same way there is regulations for internet service providers, there is regulation for banks which give you access to financial markets or give you access to stock exchange, for example. I think it's important to define some rules because the rules are different in different countries to essentially the operators of DeFi and people giving access. And my bet for the future is that a lot of centralized exchanges will get licenses in different countries. Most of the time, this license will be only for trading spot, and they will not be able to offer derivative. And I see part of a future where centralized exchanges will be coming to access DeFi and kind of facilitate access to DeFi protocols via their centralized exchanges. So the same way today your bank, the core business of your bank is to essentially work with your money. So you get paid every month your salary, you put it at the bank, and then the bank helps you to manage this money. And then the bank offers you and package together many different products from many different other companies. Your bank is most of the time not an insurance company, but you can buy insurance from the bank. Your bank is not a stockbroker, but they give you access to stock exchange and so on. So I think we see in the distribution of finance, access point to finance through the banks. And I think in DeFi, we're going to see probably something similar, where we're going to see different service providers in finance starting to give access to DeFi and facilitate the experience for the users. And regulators should be considering to regulate and help these operators to provide this service in a healthy way. Regulating the technology has never happened and will hardly happen anywhere. It took regulators 5 to 10 years to understand that the internet was not, as a technology, could not be regulated. And then they started to design only after some regulations for the operators themselves. So regulate the operator, but do not regulate the technology. Otherwise, we kind of cool down the innovation, and that's something which is now a global phenomenon.
It is all really exciting. I feel like dYdX is doing a lot of big plans, big things. And what do you think we can expect as users? Any plans for 2024?
Expect more trading pairs and new markets on dYdX. We can see that via the number of votes on the chain. I know some people are working on mobile app, making sure they get available on the iPhone world as well as the Android world, and some great and better experience for stakers as well. So the facility, the more rewards to the stakers, and that's something super exciting. As a protocol, we are already integrated with Ledger, so that's already to connect with dYdX in a safe way. So we expect here that there is a lot of more additional integrations coming up. The operation DAO of dYdX has support in Chinese. So if you have questions, the software, the DAO of dYdX is helping Chinese users in Chinese language to understand more. We will be also joining some events in the region. So we'd love to connect with all of you guys at various crypto conferences. Looking forward to connect with you.
Thank you so much, Charles. I find this so insightful, and personally, I've learned a lot from you and super inspirational. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, and see you on the dYdX chain.
谢谢你看到这里哦，欢迎用下面的连结到 Line 跟 Discord 群组，跟努力的大家一起讨论。我们在 OKX、币安、派网呢，跟其他的大交易所都帮大家争取到了最高8折 20% off 的交易手续费减免。用下面的连结注册呢，你的交易成本就更低了。也欢迎告诉我你接下来想要看什么，我们在币圈继续努力，下一次见，拜拜。